You have a very important question, that what is worship in Islam? Okay, act of worship is certain things, and the certain things are not worship. In other words, in Islam, everything is a part of worship, but there are certain specific act of worship. Certain things are not as a absolute act of worship, but they are considered part of worship. In other words, act of worship involve first five things. One is that when you say Shahada, performing 5-time obligatory prayer is a specific worship which is done to Allah. In other words, we supplicate, we submit, we surrender our will to Allah. Then we deal with people, and then we deal with the sources and resources. So when you talk to somebody, I need help, you know that you are asking a person not as a God, you're asking a person for help as a person. But when you worship, in other words, you are subjecting inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alamin. All my prayers, all my sacrifices, all my devotional worship is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of all the worlds. So when we do ablation, when we do the prayers 5 times, that is the act of worship. When we fast, it is the act of worship, because we are not doing for anybody but for the pleasure of God. When we give charity, we do not give it because we are physically exchanging money, giving money to somebody, but our intention is Allah is receiving my charity. As what the al-Mu'mineen, the mother of the faithful, said, when they ask her for donation, she would wash the currency and give it to them. They said, why would you wash the coins? She said, she would put fragrance on them. So she said, I'm not giving it to you, I'm giving it to Allah, even though it is coming to your hand. So this is an act of worship. But we cannot do this act of worship that Allahu Akbar, instead of saying Allah is greatest, we say Muhammadu Akbar. And then we should start and reciting all the things for Muhammad. In Quran, when we recite, we are reciting the word of God. So act of worship involves reading Quran. And Quran reading with understanding and comprehension and implementation is all done for the God. So, but when we deal with the people, we do the transaction, we do the business dealing, we deal with our spouses and family as a act of kindness. It's, even though it is not a part of quote unquote worship where we are totally talking to God, here we are dealing with people, but we have reward for them. So Muslim is in act of worship all the time, but those act of worships are divided. If I had explained you better, that fasting, praying, going for Hajj, paying charity to the people, in our heart we always have to have an intention. I'm doing it for God. As soon as you put the intention in there, it becomes godly act, and that becomes act of worship. Being kind to your parents is an act of worship for the love of Allah.
That I'm following you, like worship in Islam is an action that you take in the physical world with an intention to please Allah.
True.
Sometimes you do it with people, like in Jummah prayer. Sometimes you do it in private, like fasting or whatever. Or you can do both. You can do them with people or privately. But that's what worship is. And we don't do it with any sort of expectation. Like, we're not necessarily even asking Allah for anything. It's sort of just like our obligation and our duty, right?
Little expansion on that. Yes, you should ask only Allah.
Like at the dua part, like maybe we.
Yes, Prophet says a dua.
Shahid, you want to also mention about praising Allah too. Okay, that is also part of worship.
Absolutely.
As a human being, you also can praise people around you, because that is also act of worship,
Praising and being kind and gratitude. One lan yashkur nasa lan yashkur Allah, who does not thank people or show the gratitude cannot show gratitude to God. So gratitude to the people for the God has made them to be companion with me. When we do fasting, we do prayer, we should ask Allah. The prayer is a moment where we are directly talking to Allah. And when we are fasting, we are in the constant state of talking and being in the presence of God. So we should ask in those moments to Allah. Asking for things directly is from Allah.
Okay, so then my question is, if we do these things with the intention of pleasing a person, does it become shirk, or pleasing my job, or do you see what I mean?
I know what you mean. Very important question. Very good question. When you do things to please people, it is not with the act of worship. It is not the act of believing them as you are doing it as them as a god. When you are performing your job best, it is a Muslim's requirement that when you are asked for a service, you do it with your full energy and strength, and as a earning, as it is called halal, a righteous earning. That suppose if I gave you a job to complete a project and then pay your salary, that you're supposed to do it with the righteous, pure intention that Allah is watching me, even though this person I'm doing job for, but he's not my God. So if I ask you for $1, it doesn't mean I'm asking you as a God. But if I believe that you are the God and I'm asking for, as people carve idols which are not God, and then sit in front of them and they worship them and devote to them, they are not God. So this is what a very clear distinction to be understood. In Islam, act of worship is everything, but because Allah is always in our forefront. Every thought we have with Allah, but then there is a specific act of worship and there is a general act of worship. As I said, there are 6 things are specific and rest of is public dealing. So if I cheated you, I cheated in my heart. My intention was cheating you. Allah knows that my heart. When people were cheating in the scale and measure, they were cheating people, not Allah, but Allah knew it and they were punished for that. People who are doing wrong knowingly and denying, that's a disobedience to God. That is an act of disworship or disbelief. So that's punishable. There are fard and there are non-fard, means obligatory and non-obligatory act of worship. 5-time prayers is an obligatory act of worship. That is Allah said, and Prophet says this is the way you talk to God. So there are categories in worship. Yes, dealing with people or affairs in life is 94%, if I may correctly explain you. But they are still part of act of worship, but not that act of worship which is involved with prayer, reading of the Quran, like fasting in the month of Ramadan, going to pilgrimage. That is a particular act. It is to be compared with like people who worship idol, those who go to a temple or go to, I think in Himalayan mountain, Kashi or what they call, or those go to Buddha pilgrimage to the Tibetan mountains. They are going in there for pilgrimage. For us, we go to pilgrimage to Mecca. So there are the distinction between that act of worship.
So for Muslims, our worship to Allah is when we have direct communication with Allah, and the intention, our motivation to doing that would be possibly to get closer or bring closeness with Him in our life, yes. Right? So we can feel His presence throughout.
Yes.
I have one more question.
That is called taqwa. That is the thing, that the constant being aware of God's presence with us is the definition of taqwa. Be conscious of God.
So that would be the end goal of our worship.
That right? is our goal. That is what we want to achieve.
Okay. So one more question, and this is a little bit complex too, but it's been bothering me for a while. So like in Hindu tradition and also like African tradition religion, they have something specifically called ancestor worship, where they do a bunch of prayers where they acknowledge their ancestors, right? What's interesting is like when I look at Islam, it seems like within our prayers, we do have a section that is quote unquote like ancestor worship, in which we acknowledge our prophet, we acknowledge all of their forefathers. And then it seems like in the Sufi tradition, they even have like these prayers where they acknowledge their sheikhs and they go back and they do all this sort of stuff as well. To put blessings upon their quote-unquote ancestors. So it seems like when we do salawat on the Prophet, that might be the same thing. So they call it ancestor worship. I mean, is that really worship, or is that just us
all right.
paying our dues?
Very good question, but you answered in your own question. What you said, that when we send peace and blessing upon the Prophet, when we invoke or remember the name of those ancestors or deceased or sheikhs, we are not worshipping to those sheikhs. We are invoking their name as a wasila, as an intercession, or thanking Allah for having them among us. Like Quran talk about the Prophet Hud and Saleh and Ibrahim and Moses and all those. So mentioning them in the Quran does not mean we are worshipping them. whatever they believe that they are worshiping them, that may be a misnomer or maybe a mistaken. This is why we very clearly say worship is for Allah. We can invoke, like in prayer we send salawat upon Prophet. It doesn't mean we are worshiping Prophet. We are saying, oh Allah, send salawat upon him. When we say, oh Allah, fala fala such and such sheikh, you have mercy upon him. So still we are asking Allah for mercy. And then we say, oh Allah, because of this beloved of yours, we ask you to have mercy upon us, or give us your blessing. So our source is Allah. We invoke.
So if we were talking to our ancestors directly, that would be ancestor worship. If we were saying, oh, Prophet Muhammad, give us blessing.
No, if we ask Prophet Muhammad as God, if we believe Prophet Muhammad as God, independent of God, this is what these idol worshippers were thinking, that they can worship these idols, or the Hindus think that their ancestor can help them because they believe that they have a divine power. Prophet Muhammad does not have a divine power. Prophet Muhammad can only help us, whether living or not living, if Allah gave him the permission. If Allah does not give him permission, no one can help. Like as the living person, as I said before, if I ask you to give me $1, if I ask you for $1 as a God, I did the shirk. If I ask you $1 as a human, as a better person, as a rich person, as a generous person, it does not become an act of shirk.
Okay, so I have a metaphor just to for clarifying. Tell me if I'm on the right track here. So it's like Allah or God is like the CEO, and all these other people are like the assistants, the secretary, like other people work for him. So it's just sort of ridiculous for us to go to the secretary and ask for our needs. We acknowledge the secretary, we're nice to them, we're polite, we send our blessings, we give them cards and things like that because we appreciate what they've done for the CEO. But when we have something, it's just more effective for us to talk to the CEO, right?
That's what is worship.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
And dua al-mughal ibadah, dua, the supplication is the head of the worship. So when I did my labor of praying God and worshiping him, glorifying him, calling his glory and revere him and all that, after that I need my payment. What is the payment? My Lord, have mercy upon me, have my children. I invoke my supplication in the name of your beloved. Oh Allah, I am not able to send salawat. I'm not worthy of sending blessing on Prophet Muhammad. On my behalf, you send blessing on Muhammad. Oh Allah, Muhammad was your beloved and you created him and you made him a messenger. So on his name, I ask you to have mercy upon me. So you see, we are still having a God, but we are kind of taking a resource, as you use the leverage on it. If you don't do it, nothing will be harmed. But if you do it with the intention that Muhammad is not the doer, Allah is the doer. Muhammad has no power over Allah, that's when it is. So when we call or remember our sheikh, because when we do that, we send mercy upon them. We send dua for them. But dua and mercy comes from Allah, even though we are the provider, or we are the asking physically that Allah have mercy on my deceased and living parents, but Allah is the one who will send it. Even though I love them, I respect them, and I think they are pious and righteous, and they are the one who took care of me. So all these things have to be understood in the context that if you believe anybody is going to help me as a divine superior to God, is a shirk.
But Prophet Muhammad does do interventions, right?
By supplicating to God. He cannot.
Yes.
Okay, then there's a little, since you brought the example of CEO, there are certain duties which are assigned, like angels are given the assignment to run the worldly affairs, and then they move the clouds and rain and weather and all that. Angels are there who are supposed to provide the blessing and mercy, but they are given assignments. So Prophet Muhammad, as a messenger of God, has been given certain authority and certain powers. And those powers he can act by the will of Allah, not against the will of Allah.
Sure. Okay, so basically it's like we are learning how to have more efficient direction of worship, basically.
Islam is only thing that worship is for God as a God.
Yeah.
La ilaha illallah. None is worthy of worship except Allah. That is what it is. Muhammad is everything but messenger of Allah. He cannot be Allah. This is where the shirk will never happen in a believer. If I believe that anything like object, living or non-living object, as a God beside God, that's a shirk. So my whole prayer and worship will be wasted as long as I believe that this thing can do it beyond Allah or other than Allah.
If we're getting favor from anything in the unseen or the seen world, we have to acknowledge that it's because of the permission of Allah.
Exactly.
Really. Okay.
But again, when we ask Prophet Muhammad for helping us, is that in the world where he is given information and he prays for us to Allah, and then Allah have his mercy upon us.
Sure.
So when we say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, oh Allah, send your prayers and blessing upon Muhammad wa ali Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim, the way you send your blessing and mercy upon Abraham and his family, innaka hamidun majid, indeed you are praiseworthy. It means we ask Allah that you are the praiseworthy. So we cannot, because we are not God, we cannot send salutation on Muhammad. We are asking Allah to, on our behalf, send mercy upon him. So Allah Ta'ala, so in the return, he sent mercy to Prophet, yet he sent 10 blessing upon us. He forgive 10 of our sin. He raise our 10 darajat. He make us our status elevated because we ask what he want us to ask. You follow point? We ask Allah.
Earning his trust in a way.
Yes. We cannot have anything without God in there. As the creator, as the Lord, as the provider, as the sustainer. This is something very, some people get a little mixed up, and some scholars says, so you can make some confusion, so do not even invoke Prophet Muhammad's name. In that, but Allah says that your prayer will not be answered unless you bring the Muhammad's name in there. It is Allah's condition, not our condition. Allah says, Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Indeed, Allah and
sense in terms of like what I've seen like in my physical world, like when you want to get in with a group or with a power structure in the physical world, there's certain protocols.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And you have to respect the group conscience and like the way that they do things.
Exactly.
So it makes sense to me, you know.
Yeah, without Prophet Muhammad, Islam is not existing, because then it will be anybody's story. So Allah,
it's like the
similarly, the other nation says, we don't need you to teach us about God, because the poor and destitute are your companion. These people who are the lowest of the socioeconomic status, we don't think we should follow you because they are poor people are following you. So this is something very clearly to be understood. Without Prophet Muhammad's peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, we say blessing of Allah be upon him. We are not saying my blessing on him. We say blessing of Allah be upon him. I can bless my youngers. I can say I bless you means I pray for you to Allah. When we say blessing, we are saying we are sending the blessing of Allah. It is just a way to understand. When the other faith people, when they invoke their ancestor, they think that they have a divine power. They have a divine power to intervene beyond God, because they do not have a clear concept of God. This is one thing to be very clearly understood. Islam is the monotheistic faith in which Allah is the ultimate authority and no compromise in his uniqueness.
Well, I see that there is a similarity in like, I think we do believe that they do have the power to intervene only with the permission of Allah.
Absolutely. Because Allah gave them the power, like Allah gave power to angels to do things, like Allah gave power to Jibril to give Mary a baby Jesus. It's Allah who made the babies, right? But the Jibril was given power because he was not even a human. So, and he appeared to her like a man, and he breathed into her womb and she got pregnant. So Allah can give authority and power to anyone he wants. And again, similarly, Allah guide people to Islam through good or bad. In other words, people go to jail and they become Muslim. It's because they have done the crime, and when they came out of prison, they have a faith. Allah saved them by putting them in a very hardship situation. So as we understand, Allah can guide a person to Islam through a non-believer, and Allah can misguide a believer through a believer. This happens. People who have gone astray after seeing the Prophet, as we have heard the story about the other nations. So yes, a person can be guided and misguided. It is all in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hand. But our act of worship, our act of devotion, extreme act of respect and worship is worship.
So basically, shirk is basically, which is one of the biggest sins in Islam, right? Associating partners with God. That would be basically if we are giving our attention and assuming that somebody can benefit us without the help of Allah.
Yes.
So that's what shirk is.
Shirk has this definition: anybody equal to Allah, above Allah, beyond Allah, beside Allah, and overpower Allah.
So like Allah having to answer to something.
Say that again. Maybe you just misquoted.
Yeah, so maybe meaning that Allah has something above it.
Allah is ultimate, yes.
Right, okay. So okay, that makes sense. So if we're trying to even do something without including Allah in the consciousness of it,
Yes.
then that is shirk.
Exactly. So when you go to a boss, you ask for a raise, right? He helped you monetarily, but you know he's a boss, he's not God.
Right.
So
But we go there with the intention of thinking that God is not part of the decision-making process of it, then that's shirk.
exactly. Because God gave him the boss power that he can give me more money.
Right.
I asked mother to give me food. It means the mother is not God, but God made mother to give me the food. So she is my resources of nutrition.
Right.
You see, we want love from people, but we know that the God softened their heart. That's why we said, Lord, make their heart soften for me. So even though we are dealing with people, so in every aspect we understand that if somebody have a harshness and is not kind, it is, we ask God to make this person kind or save me from his wrath. So even though the wrath will come from the individual, the poison of a snake cannot hurt you unless God wills so. So nothing can hurt and save unless Allah has a will into it. So our thing, believe is, ultimate thing is, when we worship Allah, we say Allah is greatest. We do not say anything else is greater than Allah. So this is act of worship. When the non-Muslims say Buddha is the greatest, or Ram and Krishna or Jesus is the greatest, this is where they did the shirk.
Okay, I understand.
Well, may Allah make it understand easy for us, and inshallah we will meet again. Any question, any comment, Kevin? I think Kevin has left for the day. Inshallah we will meet next Sunday, and inshallah we will start with the next chapter.
I'm still here.
Yeah, chapter Al-Namal, the ants. It is very interesting chapter, in a lot of stories about it. It is the 48th chapter revealed, and it is 27th in the sequence of Quran now. So inshallah we will talk about that chapter. Kevin, do you have anything to suggest or add or comment?
No, it was just all very clear, and just a lot of there was just a lot there. So I'm just absorbing it through.
It is really overwhelming, even though I've been doing all my life. When I read them, this just blows me away. Just may Allah give us the strength and guidance.
Yeah, it's basically like a totally different orientation to reality.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's just learning how to incorporate it,
Yes.
That's right.
Yes. The important thing is, when things don't work in our like and favor, that's when the patience come, and that's where the faith happens. Do not leave faith because I worship God, so everything should be good with me. As we heard that they beheaded Prophet Yahya, the John the Baptist, and they tried to crucify Jesus, which we believe did not happen, and they put the omentum of a camel on Prophet Muhammad. So when things do not work in our favor, the way we like, it doesn't mean that God is not helping. God is testing. And test is the patience.
So basically, like, with those, for example, like that, would it be a wise dua to ask Allah to bring support or angelic, like, support to have courage and patience or something like that?
Absolutely.
If I find that I'm weak in that area, let's say.
Yes. That's exactly what it is. Ask Allah, and this is the moment you turn to Allah. My Lord, I have no relief. I have no hope to survive or get out of this thing. If you have, this is the destiny for me, I am going to be patient with it, but we should not give up our efforts to get out of that.
Right.
A struggle. That is jihad. Keep striving and struggling to getting out and hoping the best, that Allah leave. You see, in exam, you prepare for the exam, you take the exam, then leave it on the trust of Allah. My Lord, I leave it upon to you to give me success. I would like to succeed in this one. So directly ask Allah that give me success in this matter, and give it soften. If you particularly want somebody to soften up, focus that. This is how I do. And I find that Allah works for me. When I focus that person, I say, this person, my Lord, is make this person soften, kinder, and it's going to be difficult for me to deal with. I make it easy for me and soften his person so that we could have an easy relation. And this is how it works. It always works. So this is how a life whole thing is about. And when it doesn't work, be patient. And this is where the faith, do not lose faith. Always have faith. As we see 950 years of Prophet Noah preaching and teaching, could not save his son. Prophet Lut, keep preaching and teaching. His wife could not be saved, because there's some people who will not be saved, and we should accept that they cannot be saved. But our job is pray for them as long as we do, because we get reward of that act. So any further comment or question?
No, that's it.
Alhamdulillah. Let's make dua. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever we recited, whatever we heard, what we discussed, make it guidance for us. Give us life in Islam, give us death in Iman, and our descendant till the day of judgment who will be born in our family, and entire humanity, and especially the people of this country. Open their heart for the Islam, soften the humanity's heart for the Islam, open them for the Quran and the love of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ya Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, save